updates. As you may be well aware, I'm the Chair of Housing and Community Development for the City of Boston. And I'm also now been appointed to the Linkage Fund, which means that as developers are developing, if they choose not to put affordable units in a building, if 13% required, they can choose to pay into a community fund. And that's the fund that now I'm appointed as a trustee to vote on where that money goes. Majority of it all has to go to either job creation and training or affordable housing. And so then folks come before us, there's about 7 of us, and we vote on the projects citywide. And as the chair of housing and community development, I've introduced 2 pieces, or 2 ordinances. The first was an anti-speculation ordinance. It is part of my understanding and real firm belief that our housing policy in the city needs to be threefold. First, it needs to be about building. I am not saying we should not be building, but I do think we need to be very careful about the standards for which we're holding developers to, and saying when you exercise the privilege of building in our neighborhoods, and it is a privilege of building on our waterfronts, of coming here to Boston, then these are certain standards we need to uphold them to. I think we need to look at whether the inclusionary zoning of 13% should stay as low as it is. I think we need to ask folks, if you're going to be building, are we really going to allow for waivers for affordable units? Maybe we should start to examine, if you're going to build for all of us. It's a real conversation we need to have with developers. Beyond the numbers of affordable units, let's talk about the practical reality and the flooding that we saw here in the North End, in Charlestown, and in East Boston. Are we building sustainable buildings, right? And by that, I mean not buildings that are high enough that they're protected, but our neighborhoods get all the flooding. Are we really building in a sustainable, environmentally friendly way, and holding developers to that standard? So let's build, let's have some real standards that reflect the character of our neighborhoods, making sure that they're not overbuilt, but also making sure that people who are coming into our city do feel welcome. The other part though, and this is what's really important, is along with building, we have to protect. By that I mean we really need to make sure that the units that we currently have and the folks that we currently have here are not pushed out in the rush to build. Because at the end of the day, yes, we do have a population surge, we have more people coming here with higher incomes, but they won't be able to be in those luxury units that we're all building if they're all filled with Airbnbs, if they're all being flipped and turned over constantly, if at the end of the day we are actually not providing pathways for normal folks to actually be in those buildings. So what we're finding is that we can build all we want if we don't protect our neighborhoods, if we don't actually inform tenants about their rights, if we're not providing resources to small landlords, if we're not doing that constant protection of our neighborhoods while we're building, then we're going to build for a lot and lose a lot at the same time, and we'll probably end up in the same situation we are now with rising rents. And the final component of housing policy that I think the city needs to adopt is ownership. So you need to build, you need to protect, you also need to create more owners. And more owners of all generations, especially those who are just starting out. That's how you stabilize a neighborhood. It isn't necessarily through rent control or telling people what to do with the market. It's providing opportunity for people to be part of the market. And that means bringing developers to the table. And I would say it's really good news with the developers I've been speaking to. When they have condos on the table, when they're talking about all these luxury units, I'm asking a very simple question: what about rent to own? What about these options where someone can come in there, pay rent for 5 years and have an option to buy and use the rents or a percentage of that they've been paying as a down payment? It's a way to allow for more economic diversity to get into these buildings and begin to start to own more within our neighborhoods, so that we're not losing a whole generation of young people or young professionals who may grow up here and know that they'll never be able to afford to stay here. I'd love to see us, again, start to build for families, and that's another part of the building. Build more than 1-bedroom condos, maybe bring 2 or 3-bedroom condos so that families can come and stay. So looking at all 3 components and buckets, I think we'll actually create a neighborhood, we'll actually create a city, and we'll be able to meet the needs of our growing population without displacing our long-term residents. So that's kind of the big picture of what I've been working on. Short-term rentals, it's been brought up, I know you just heard a bunch about it. It's filled up my entire inbox from folks in the North End, especially in Charlestown and in East Boston. And just to answer a quick question about the 90 days, I specifically asked about that number. They felt it was a tipping point for what would prevent somebody from just going strictly Airbnb. over renting out long-term to long-term folks. So they said, oh, if you cut it at 90 days, it's still more profitable to rent to, you know, a normal person. So I said, okay, fine, let's just do some basic math. This is talking with Chris English. Is it Chris English? Yeah. He was like, I said, so what's the average rent for an Airbnb? He said $205. So you can pull out your calculator, but just trust me, when I did the math, 90 times 205 is about $18,000 plus dollars that you can make in 90 days. So that amounted to an average rent of $1,500 a month, which is actually a lot more than, I know it's below market for some people, but it's still a lot more than what some people are paying. So did we really hit that tipping point where someone would say it's worth it to me to go only 90 days or not? I don't know that we did. The other things that I'm really particularly concerned about is, yes, we will have a licensing component in this ordinance, but we don't have a notice component. And I know there are a lot of North End folks who are desperate to get like a liquor license or to do something, and who they have to tell, the meetings that they have to come to present that argument to their neighbors saying, I deserve, you know, the right to do this. I actually would like to see a notice component too, so that I'm told, you know, if Ford, my neighbor, wants to get an Airbnb, he got a license for it, I get the notice, he's got a license to have an Airbnb. So that's it. I would like to see it amended in that way. The other way is, to be very frank, I'm concerned about injuries. Maybe it's the lawyer in me, but if I have an Airbnb, she's from Australia, whatever happens, I'm in my little triple decker, and she comes in, she injures herself, she leaves. I can almost assure you a lot of insurance companies will say, yeah, that wasn't part of the policy, that wasn't part of the plan. I'm not paying for her, and she can come either take my house, right, sue me outright, or we can end up in tons of litigation. So again, there's a notice component to either insurance companies to let them know, or require additional insurance, and also let your neighbors know. So those are just some of the problems I have with the form that it's in right now. Just real quick in terms of process, that form will have I don't think I'm leaving. I was supposed to come to the Valentine's Day celebration tomorrow. I won't be here, so but Kathy will be here for me, and it'll probably be 5-6 hours. So maybe you will be able to make the hearing, because I have a feeling it's going to be all day. After that hearing, then we will go into working sessions, specifically talking about amendments to the bill. I encourage you, if you can't make it, to watch the hearing. It's recorded. To please, if you have questions, if you have concerns, if there's certain amendments that you want to see, to email it. I forgot, not only am I chair of the housing, but I'm co-chair of the government ops committee. So I'll be sitting there with the chair, who is Councilor Michael Flaherty, as he's doing the hearing. So those are just some of the things that are on my mind. The other thing that has also filled up my inbox from a lot of our North Enders is the parking fee, the proposed parking fee. We haven't had a hearing on that yet. I will say I'm getting a lot of feedback about it, a lot of real concern that this is just another form of taxation, that they feel that a lot of folks aren't guaranteed the spot. On the other side, people are really worried about the over-abuse. If you offer something for free, that people tend to abuse it. So there's two different ways to look at it. I'll be at the hearing. I'm on that committee for planning, development, and transportation. I encourage you to come out there, to continue to email, and please let me know your thoughts about it as well. So those are the three kind of major issues on my plate right now. So I will turn it over to you to hear about some of the concerns that you'd like me to address, or just to listen.
Lydia, I'd like to first off, congratulations.
Thank you.
I like the notice component of the Airbnb. I know the hearing starts tomorrow, so you probably haven't done a whole lot of feedback, but what feedback do you have, and what's been the likelihood of getting that notice component part of any legislation?
So the feedback has been overwhelmingly against the investor classification, especially in the North End. I would say it's 90-10 in terms of against any kind of loose legislation for Airbnb when you talk about North Enders. It gets when you look citywide in certain neighborhoods, there are people who who really firmly believe it's mine, my house, my apartment, whatever it is, and the government has no business telling you what to do with it. And you can just remind them that good luck with that. I mean, there's so many property taxes, so many laws that govern right now what you do with your property. I think that's not an argument that's really going to win the day. And then in terms of the ability to amend and change, that's what the working sessions are for. Those are also open to the public, but that's a direct, like we're going line by line, we're talking about certain things. That's post the hearing, and then yeah, you can amend it completely.
Okay. But overall, there seems to be some support for the notice component, depending on who you talk to.
Yeah, I mean, most people think it's pretty reasonable. I mean, they just want to know. And also, I feel like a lot of times, the way it's written right now, we have put a lot on ISD, and I firmly believe that it's Airbnb or the short-term rentals who should be finding out who's licensed. And if they're not licensed, you don't conduct any business with them. So we need to put it back on those folks who have the resources, the money, and the time to be able to look at folks. Yes?
Congratulations and welcome to the meeting. I just have a concern with, I guess we have one of the largest rat populations in the country, and we have a bad garbage situation.
Yeah.
You know, we've had meetings before, people show up, and there's some discussion and conversation, but there's no resolution. You know, what is the city doing about baiting for rats? What does the city do when, you know, developers come in and they dig them all up, you know, when they're building? And how much does the garbage situation, basically where it's a feeding ground from 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. the next day, you know, where's there a way to come together to try to keep, you know, garbage off the streets, which limits how much rats eat or the attractiveness to certain areas, and what is the city doing about rats? I mean, I'm concerned as a business owner and as a resident on both situations.
And I've actually had a lot of conversations about rat from day one. That has been the #1 concern I've heard with trash and rats, which they're connected, right? So always you can call the office, we can come out and do a treatment, right? And we'll send somebody out there. But there's a real question about systemically, how are we going to deal with this issue? And we've been researching everything from, and I'm not kidding you, from owls, buying, investing. I'm not kidding. Like I was looking up urban owl programs and things like that. New York tried it, and someone stole the owl huts, but it was actually working for them. I'm not kidding. This is not a joke. I have taken it very seriously that this is a quality of life issue, and considering the gem that the North End is and how we promote it as one of the, like, it is the historic site of this country. To think that it's rat infested is to some people very,
not just the North
no,
End,
I know, but I mean, but I only represent, you know, this area, so like it's particularly concerning. So we've been looking at that. We've been looking at sterilization in terms of not only looking at the poisons that we use, but one that actually prevents them from having any more. We've also specifically when it comes to garbage, there's been 2 proposals at the city level. One is, and I was specifically talking about in terms of budgeting today, is bringing hokies back 7 days a week that follow the garbage trucks that actually are individuals who are picking up the trash or making sure that they're picked up. And that we have that we have the funding and budget to come behind them to support that 7 days a week, because we do need that. And then when it comes to the actual trash placement, I know there's been a lot of debate, 2 days versus 3 days, in terms of how we want to have the trash. I do know one thing that seemed to make sense was same day placement of the trash, so that it's not necessarily put out the night before, but it's put out the morning of, so you don't have overnight placement of trash. And so I'd love to hear your feedback on that as North Enders who are directly impacted by that policy, if that's a realistic policy. I know commercial folks already pay for a private entity to bring that out, so this is maybe more from a residential, but how we can, as a community pilot, how to deal with trash so that we're actually leading the city in dealing with it, not following or constantly being surrounded by it.
So who are ideas communicated to? How does, because that has been discussed, same day removal, and for some reason it doesn't happen as much sense as it makes to put the garbage out at 7 in the morning, because they come here at about 10 a.m.
Right.
But so how, those conversations have been had, so how do we bring them forward? Who do we contact?
So,
Is this already happening, or is there something that we can to help?
Well, I appreciate that, because I think as we're talking to Department of Public Works, as we're talking to individuals, a lot of what we need to be able to say is, these are the folks who are standing with me when I tell you that this is going to work in this neighborhood. But I think also that frustration that you're saying is something I've heard from many folks. This is not, I'm not coming up with, rocket science. It's just that we've been here, we've told representatives, and it didn't happen. And I don't want to sit there and say, oh, somehow I'm like the magic wand that's going to make it happen. I can promise you I'm going to be the advocate that's fighting like hell for it, though. And again, this is something though, I look to you though, is this something that you want, the same day thing? I want to be fighting for something that the community's divided on. With the 2 or 3 day, that's a little different of the garbage pickup. So I'm happy to follow up directly with you, and as I'm having communication with DPW about this, I'm happy to CC you on those emails to make sure that there's firm clarity about at least the same day pickup being one thing. When it again comes to the Hokies or individuals following to clean up, that's a budget matter I'm fighting for to make sure that the North End gets that funding to support that. Keep working on it.
Other questions? Questions from the audience? Lydia, thank you so much.
Thank you.